Hello, I'm Deb Schaefer. I'm with Stoneridge Software, and we are doing our Stoneridge Connect event. This session is understanding the move from Dynamics GP to Dynamics Business Central and things that you need to know so you can be prepared for the move. So our agenda today is to go through an introduction, the solution opportunities, data considerations, the timeline, implementation scope, empowerment, and what's next. So again, I'm Deb Schaefer. I'm a team manager and solution architect at Stoneridge. I've been doing this for over 25 years, functional consulting for ERP solutions, solution design, implementations, upgrade, and support of Dynamics Business Central, Great Plains, and CE or CRM. I have the following certifications. So I'm a certified trainer. I'm a Business Central functional consultant, Power Platform Fundamentals, and D365 for sales. So there's a number of points that I want to talk through today related to moving from GP to Business Central. And this presentation will help you not only plan for it, get prepared for the move, but also help you get in contact with people that can help you if you're ready to take the next steps. So related to moving to Business Central, some of the frequent questions in the process relate to what do I do with my data? Where's my historical data going to land? How are we going to help the client team through the implementation to Business Central? And what does that process look like? And then it's always important to keep in mind the people, process, and technology pieces for a smooth transition of an ERP solution. So we'll talk through those. And then the data considerations in depth when you're changing an ERP solution. So where should your data go? So talking about solution opportunities first, generally a combination of Business Central and ISVs will meet your business needs and help you gain efficiencies in your day-to-day operations. So with Business Central, initially there's two main types of licenses. So an essentials license, which covers finance, cash management, sales and receivables, purchase and payables, and inventory. And then a premium license that will get you into things like service. So talking about more of a field service type functionality where you're doing things like tracking serialized items and how often those items have been worked on, maintained, have monthly, quarterly, yearly tasks needed for them, and then also getting you into manufacturing. Related to that, there's a number of ISVs or independent software vendors that our GP to BC clients frequently use. A lot of that centers around AP automation, so automating that process of bringing in purchase invoices, helping you with that three-way match, and automating that process. So if you deal with a lot of purchase invoices, you still can use purchase orders and do your receivings if you're doing those processes, or if you're just doing AP automation with purchase invoices, that's fine too. There's also solution or independent software vendors for warehouse and distributions. We frequently use InsightWorks and Yavion ProBatch. There's credit card and collections, EDI solutions, reporting solutions, and then working with not-for-profits, so grant and fund management, as well as integrations and APIs, frequently for things like payroll. So what payroll solution are you using currently, and what solution are you using going forward once you move to Business Central? So ISVs like ADP for payroll, they have an out-of-the-box integration that's already created. Typically takes us 4 to 8 hours to get that set up, and then the payroll transactions automatically flow into your general ledger. Now we get into data considerations. So with your data considerations, the things we want to talk about here are your historical data. So depending on how long you've been on GP, then you may have anywhere from a couple of years of GP data to 20 plus years of GP data. And where do you want that to go, and how much of it do you really need to bring forward? For your general ledger, we typically bring over 24 months of summary data. So when you think about your smart list for account summaries and you run that smart list, you're going to see that you've got those broken out by periods. So always starting with period 0, then 1 through 12, or based on the number of periods that you have set up. So some companies do use a 13 period year, in which case then we're going to have 13 periods that we need to bring over. When we look at that data, the considerations that we have related to the general ledger are that the historical data and your chart of accounts is very dependent on what things look like and what they will look like once you get into Business Central. So one of the big differences in Business Central is that Business Central uses the concept of dimensions to track the additional breakouts or break aparts of your data. So things like department or division or customer vertical, where you typically in GP would use different segments for this. So again, you'd have your main account number, dash department, dash division, dash customer vertical, and you're always incrementally growing your chart of accounts to track those new breakouts, whether it's a new department or a new division. Maybe you've acquired a company and you want to keep that data separate. So your chart of accounts in Dynamics GP is segmented. So again, you're growing that as you are growing your business. In Business Central, you're able to use dimensions. You can have up to 8 dimensions. And within those dimensions, you can have an unlimited number of values on those dimensions. So the benefit to this is we have our main chart of accounts or your main accounts, and you don't have to grow those. So you can add dimension values to a dimension anytime you need to. And when you're doing transactional work, you can then assign those dimensions to the transaction. So depending on if you're doing transactions where you've got inventory and you're doing sales orders or purchase orders to specific inventory items, or you're doing sales invoices or purchase invoices and you're doing those directly to a GL, you can assign the dimensions to those at the transaction level. And that's going to allow you then to report on data based on those individual dimensions and the related dimension values. When we start to look at accounts payable and accounts receivable, we have a couple of different ways that we can do this. So depending on the amount of data that you want to track or want to keep track of for reference, probably the easiest thing to do is just to add what's called historical ledger entries to the customer and vendor tables. And what this will do is this will allow us to do a one-time load of your AP and AR data. Realistically, it's a 2-time load. We do one once when we're in the process of the implementation, and then once again to refresh at go live. So you have that most up-to-date AP and AR historical data in the system. But this is a very straightforward data load. So really we're looking at things like for AR, for your customer, the sales document number, any of the line items related to that document. So truly your sales line history data or sales invoice, along with price, cost, and then the original account number on it so that you have that reference back to it. Similar, we would do with purchase invoices. So you'd have your vendor ID, you'd have then your purchase invoice lines, and then the account number, your GP account number, and then any reference that you wanted to put with that going forward. This data is only reported on. You can't do any kind of transactional activities against it, but you can go back and reference. So if you wanted to go back and see who purchased this particular item, you would have a way to do that. The other options that you have are you can use a solution like PopDoc to move your data into a data lake, and then you're able to report on it using a reporting tool, whether that's a Jet Reports or a Profix or a Vena or Power BI, then you can report on that data just by pulling it from the data lake. This actually allows you then to pull data both from BC in this case, as well as from the data lake and merge those things together. The next point on here is data cleansing prior to implementation. So it's really important to think through and look at your data that you have in the system. So whether your data is If you've got customers and you've got duplicate customers, or you've got vendors and duplicate vendors, how do you really want to track that information? And can you go through and do some of that cleanup prior to doing the Business Central implementation? So you want to go through and use things like the merge functionality through Professional Service Tools Library in GP to merge customers and vendors to the appropriate single customer or vendor. This is going to move the data related to those customers or vendors as well. So if you've got a customer, Acme Records, and in that customer record, you've got 3 Acme records, maybe somebody set one up as an ACME, and you've got another one that's an A period, C period, M period, E period, you could merge that second one into the first and move all the historical transactions with it. So now you've got combined data in GP, which makes it easier to pull that data out of GP and move it into Business Central depending on where it lands and needs to land. We want to make sure that we also are looking at open transactions. So when we bring in open transactions into Business Central, it makes the most sense to only bring those transactions that are open. So if you're doing a purchase order and you've got purchase orders that have been partially received, we would only want to bring in the quantities in that purchase order that have not been received yet. So starting at the beginning of that process. Now, if you've got purchase orders that have been received and not invoiced, then we want to bring that remaining purchase invoice amount in as an open AP transaction. So it goes in as a purchase invoice. The only remaining piece is to receive the invoice and then pay that invoice. The next thing that we want to talk through is just looking at data consistency overall. So things like payment terms, making sure that you're consistent and you have a plan in place for what payment terms do you really want to have in place. Do you want to have a net 10? Do you want it to say net space 10? Do you want it to say N10? What are the ways that you want to see that data? Because where that comes into play is not only setting up that data in Business Central, but it comes into play as we're loading data in from GP, because we want to make sure that we're making all of the correct mapping and being consistent with that data. Similar, we want to look at things like a number series. So we have a lot of customers that will bring in their open, say, sales or purchasing transaction using the existing number series. So those existing document numbers that are in your legacy system. Then when we get into Business Central, you've got the ability then to choose a new number series. So any new documents going forward can follow the new number series and that identifier for transactions. This makes it really easy for you to be able to go back and say, this is a transaction that I brought from my legacy system, or this is a transaction that was created since we went live in Business Central. And then I've talked about the duplicate master records. Well, you'll want to go through and just merge those together. Now, Business Central does have the ability to merge customer and vendor records as needed, and that's part of the out-of-the-box functionality, no professional service tools library or anything like that. But you do want to make sure that you give the right people access to do that function and talk through what that's going to look like. So then the next area is timeline. So timeline and go live considerations. So typically we look at either the month or the quarter or the year to do a go live and set a go live date. It really is up to you and what makes sense for your business to do a go live. So depending on the kind of business that you have, a month end may not make sense because your finance team is busy closing out the month the first couple of days of the next month. So potentially we might want to look at maybe the first week or the end of the first week in the new month and just have people either enter transactions into BC and not post them, or define what our cutoffs really are for that time frame. If you've only got, maybe you only hold open your AP and AR for 2 days into the next month. That's fairly easy then for people to hold transactions and then just key them in once we make sure that we've got all the reconciled master data lined up, signed up, and then imported into Business Central and signed off on. The typical GP to BC project can take anywhere from 12 weeks to over a year, depending on what all needs to happen with that. So in looking at your timeline, thinking about what is it that you want to accomplish at the end of the project, and what do you want to do in Business Central? Do you want to do status quo? Maybe it's just a move from what you're doing now in GP and you want to do that same function in BC and then look at phase 2 to bring on additional functionality? Or do you want to move into more functionality and maybe the things that would definitely bring you more efficiencies down the road, as far as maybe it's a thing like service or manufacturing or jobs that might make your jobs easier. So to continue on with that implementation scope, you have options there as far as doing everything all at once, or you can do a phased approach. So a phased approach is typically something that's going to be a 12-week implementation that'll get you started in finance. So it's basic finance phase 1. So you do GL and cash, AP and AR, and you're writing checks and you're running your business out of Business Central. You're able to do your journal entries, you're able to import your payroll in, and you can run financial reports. So you get your financial reports out of Business Central, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statement if needed, and you can continue on. Then you can look at phase 2 and say, all right, now I want to bring in inventory or manufacturing, service, or jobs, and then we'll do the additional things. Maybe you also want to look at doing something like AP automation at that point, or a credit card solution, depending on the type of business that you have. So with that, again, by doing that basic phase 1, what we call a foundation project, that's typically a 12-week project. The key with that is to really finish it. Finish phase 1, close out that project, and then move into phase 2. This is sometimes easier on clients because then you know you're doing a specific group or team that's going to be doing the foundation of Business Central. So your finance team, maybe some of your project managers, depending on what they're doing, being able to start to get used to, yes, there's changes coming, or you want to start thinking about and considering what are other independent software vendors that you'd like to bring into the mix. So are you a manufacturing company and we want to look at something like an Insight Works and shop floor insights, or warehouse or scanning, or even dynamic ship. So are there things that you're shipping out that you need a way to track those? Or are you more food or chemical and you want to do something like a Yavion Pro Badge, where we're typically doing manufacturing and lots and possibly quality. So there's a lot of options for you, and it really just takes time to sit down, not only with your sales executive, but to talk through as an internal team about where you're at right now and where do you want to go and what makes the most sense to get there. So empowerment and what's next. So empowerment really comes at the point that we're closing out that first project. So if we're doing a phased approach and we have gone through our process. So the Stoneridge proven process is different phases where we're doing align, define, create, deploy, and then empower. And so as we're doing that, we are going through and first of all, understanding your business as it is now, and then understanding through joint process design sessions, where is it that you're wanting to go? That joint process design or JPOD session is where we're getting you into the system. So your users are at the keyboard, you're learning and understanding Business Central, you're getting into the system and seeing what can happen. We've got typical data loads at that point. So you're working with your data, which always makes life easier because it's data that you understand. Then as we move from our joint process design sessions, we move into what's called CRP, or conference room pilot. And this is where you bring in that next level of users. And so these next users are going through and they're at the keyboard and now they're doing their processes. And this is where we really want to bring in those true day-to-day documents. So what's the data that you're entering into the system? What do you need to be entering into the system? And are you getting the expected results from the system once you've entered that in? From there, we move into UAT, or user acceptance testing. This is really the last point of what are we doing in Business Central? How are we doing it? And have we missed anything? Are there any changes that are still needed? Do we have our check formats and all of our reports are correct? Do we have our ACH and positive pay files? Are we getting those documents? Have they been approved by the banks? So that you know when you go live and you generate a positive pay file that the bank is going to accept it and that your check format is correct and the bank is going to accept that. So once we finish UAT, then we have a go, no go meeting and we define whether or not the team is on board and everyone is comfortable with going live. So we do a go live cutover, whether that's during the week or at over a weekend, whatever makes sense for the business, and then going live that following, typically Monday. So the team is then in the system. There may be some closeout things we still have to do in your legacy system, like pulling last minute open AP or open AR, depending on scenarios, but your team is in the system. So we call this time frame then after go live hypercare. And so we spend the next 2 to 4 weeks with your team, making sure that everybody's comfortable, not running into any issues with the project or with the solutions, and that everything is running smoothly. From that point, then you transition to support, and our support team gets not only the handoff from us, which is a very detailed document of everything that happened. How do you use financials? How do you use purchasing? What kind of functional design documents did we do? Did we modify your check format? Did we modify our sales invoice? Was there any specific additional functionality that we added for you? So were there customs? Did you need to have additional fields added to a sales document or a purchase document? And so getting through that empowerment stage and being handed then off to support, then we can get into the what's next possible phase 2 functionality. So in that case, when we go into phase 2, now you can decide if you want to bring in those additional pieces of functionality or gain additional efficiencies with your team, whether that's things again like AP automation or possibly a tax solution or manufacturing or service type uh, functions. It's really up to you and how you want to grow your business. So to recap, we've talked through not only the solution opportunities, your data considerations, what a timeline could look like, implementation scope, empowerment, and what's next. So what's next at this point is reach out to us. Stoneridge is here to support you, whether it's through functional design. Is there something in your day-to-day process that we could help you with, whether it's adding an additional field or doing an additional calculation on a report? We do that design through functional design documents. We have a team of developers that can develop that work. We will help guide you through best practices. We can assist with performance tuning and optimization, as well as additional training. So do you have new users or new team members that weren't part of the implementation process and need training? Are you getting any kind of error? Do you need help with resolutions for that? We can help you with product roadmap guidance and where are you going in the future, as well as architecture, workflow, and efficiencies, report modifications, and if there's additional reports that would make life easier, we can help design those. Integration projects. So do you have a new integration that you need? Have you picked up a new solution? And then expertise with ISV solutions. And our team works a lot with our ISVs, our independent software vendors, and a lot of us can be that first line of support and help resolve those. But if there's ever a point at which we can't resolve it, we will bring in the ISV to assist us. So thank you very much for your time today. If you have any questions or you want to know more about what it looks like to move from GP to Business Central, please reach out to either your sales executive or your CSM, and they will be happy to help you. Thank you again. Have a great day.